Hello everyone. So in today's video, I will show you how to use repository pattern to connect a ASP.NET Web API to a database and get data from the database. So before we proceed further, let me tell you that for this tutorial, if you are doing it side by side along with me, then you will need Visual Studio 2022 and SQL Server Express. So you can download both these things from Microsoft's website. I have a video on how to download and install Visual Studio 2022. You can follow that. Now let's understand a bit about repository pattern. In a peculiar application, you will have a structure like this. So a client will call a Web API controller, and then that Web API controller will use entity framework, and then that will connect to the database. So client can be anything like a Windows application, a web application, doesn't matter in which programming language it has been written. Similarly, a controller can be any application, but in this example, I am showing Web API. So when a client calls a Web API, the Web API has a controller class. That controller class has all the code to instantiate a DBContext object, and then that object will call the entity framework classes to get the database objects from database. So that is how it works in a standard application. So, but the problem in this kind of architecture is that you have too many dependency on the controller. The controller does everything. In fact, it does the business rules. It implements the business logic. It also calls the database operations. It does the logging around it. It handles all the errors that are happening in these different areas. So it is doing a lot of things which is against the design principle. So controller should do only not lot of things, but only some specific things. So in order to make it more efficient and to implement a loose coupling architecture, what we should do is that remove this dependency from the controller to another layer. So that layer is called a repository layer, and when we create any repository objects in that layer, so those objects will then talk to entity framework and get the data. So what will happen when you implement repository pattern is that instead of calling this, so there will be a repository layer which will be called from the controller, and then this repository layer will then call the DBContext entity framework. So this is how it will look like when it is implemented. So I'm going to do the same thing today in this tutorial. So let's go to Visual Studio, and let me remind you that you should subscribe to my channel so that you can get information on more of this kind of interesting videos. So subscribe and hit the bell icon, and don't forget to like the video. So let's now move ahead and create a new project. Here, select this particular template, ASP.NET Core Web API, and click on Next. Here, give a name. For example, in my case, I'm saying demo product, and then click on Next. Here I am using .NET 8. Again, I have a tutorial on how to install .NET 8. You can follow that. If you have any previous version like .NET 7 or 6, that is also fine. You can use that for this example. So now click on Create. So now the Web API project has been created. You can see some default controllers here. So we are not going to do anything with these controllers, but this is the default ones. So let's now add some NuGet packages. So right click your project and manage NuGet packages. Go to browse, search for entity framework. Here you need to add design. Similarly, add .SQL Server. And the next one you should add is the entity framework core .tools. So you are adding .design, .SQL Server, and then .tools, these three libraries. So now the packages has been added. You can go to this packages, dependencies packages, and you can see these three packages has been added. So let's close this window. And here, what you have to do is that you have to add few folders. So right click again add new folder, name it as models, and again right click and add a class. Select class and let's name it as product. And in this product class, I will add three properties. So first one is public int id, get set, public string a name, get set, and then one more is will be a public float, and it will be price because it may contain decimal places, so I'm using a type as float. So we have now three public properties. So this is our concrete class, so this will be used and a so this is basically it represents a product. So and we will create a table using the code first approach with the same name in the database. So I'll show you how to do that. Now the model class has been created. Now let's add a let's add few more things here. So click on add and again a folder, and let's call it as a repository. So here I'll add some repository classes. Let's close this and also close this. So right click, add, and here first I will add a interface. Select interface here and give a name to the interface. In my case, I will give the name as iProduct service. So that's my interface. Let me add a class. And the name will be product service. Let's add a few methods to the interface. The first property will be, so I will add two methods here. So just to show you that how this works. So you can add as number of methods as you want. So in this example, I will add a get and another will be a post. So get will be to retrieve the data. Post will be to add new products to the database. So public I enumerable product and get products. Okay, here you have to take the mouse cursor, click on this, and then use this namespace. Similarly, the next one will be public, and the return type will be product, and the name of the method will be post product, and it will accept a product as in the parameter. Right, so you have these two methods. Now let's go to product service and here implement this I product service, and if you take the cursor here, then you can implement the interface. Right, so this is the interface. Let's also do a control dot and add a constructor here, which will be useful later on to create a so we'll use a DBContext here, but we'll come to that later. So for now, leave it as it is. So you have the model class, you have the repository class. The next thing you need to do is first add a DBContext class. Now let's add a data folder and add our context class to that folder. So click or right click on the project and then data folder, and then let's add a class. The class name will be product context. So using entity, so we have to use Microsoft.entity framework, entity framework code, so that we can use the DBContext here. So that is done. So let's use a constructor. And you have to use the type here like this. So and then you have to add a property here, public db set product, and then products, and get set is equal to default. So, and import this namespace. So now our context class is ready. So what we should do next is that we need to implement this, right? So we have to implement this here. So here, so declare so the product context, and then underscore context, and here again pass it in the parameter context. So you'll get instance of the context object, and then assign it to the local variable. So this is done. Now using this context, we can add and get data from the database. So next is we have to add a implementation here. So return underscore context dot products dot to list, close the bracket and semicolon. So that's the implementation for get products. And here again we have to add a implementation for this method. So again use the context underscore dot products dot add products, and underscore context dot save changes async, and then you have to return the product. Okay, so that's the implementation of the repository class. So we have now done we have created this context, we have created a model class, and then we have created the interface, and then we have created the product service class. So the next thing you need to do is the controllers. So we have to add a new controller. So right click, add, and here a new item. Okay, no, right click, add as a controller. So right click, add controller. Here select API. Don't use this MVC controller, rather you should select API and this empty one here. Okay, the first one. So click on add. So name something. So like product controller, add, and here you have the controller. Let's add a constructor first, and then add a get product and get products. So you need to import this namespace, and in the constructor you have to, we want to use the repository here. We are not using the context class directly. That is what we want to do, which I showed you in the beginning, that we want to call the repository object. So which means you have to declare a type here, which is I product service and product service like this. Instance set a local variable called as product service, and then initialize it with this thing, this product service variable passed through the parameter. So this product service instance passed through the parameter. So this instance is now initializing this local instance. Now using this local instance, we can then call the repository get products. So this is the repository get products, and then we return this to the caller, the client. Yeah, remember the diagram. So the client, now the client will, at this point, the client will get back all the products. Now the client can be a console application, Windows application, web application, Postman, Fiddler, right? Anything can be a client. So that is, at this point, they will get the results. Next, public and product, and then post product. And here you have to pass the product, and what you need to do is that return and underscore product service dot post product. Okay, so this is what you have to do. So this is the code which will then add a product to the database. So simple. So we have these two methods which will call the repository methods, right? And repository will call the entity framework, and then entity framework will deal with the database. So next thing you have to do is go to the program class here, and you have to add few dependencies. So here at this point you can say builder dot services dot add scoped. So this is your so what we are doing here basically is called as dependency injection. So I product service, whenever someone instantiates, or whenever this happens, right, someone declares something of I product service, so we should instantiate product service and return it to that entity. So which means when .NET Engine encounters this, so it will create an instance of the actual product service class, which is this class here, repository class, and it will return the instance of this to this variable. So this variable will then contain an instance of this one. Right, so this is done. Now you have to then add one more thing, which is we have declared the DBContext class, right? But the DBContext needs to know where to go, what to do when someone says that, okay, get the products. So you have to do that here. So you have to tell the middleware that this is where the request should go. So services dot add DBContext, and the type here is the product context, and then you have to tell where is the connection string. So for that you have to do like this. So options, and then options dot use SQL server, and then in this we have to pass the connection string. Now connection strings should be in a configuration file. So that configuration file needs to live in the app settings dot so in this app settings .json, which we will update. Now it doesn't contain the connection string, but we will add it. So let's give a name to our connection string, but first we have to tell how to get it. So we'll use the builder dot configuration dot get connection string. So we are instructing that go to the app settings and search for this key, which is called as database settings, let's say. Okay, so the database settings will contain our connection string. If due to some reason this is null, then throw new exception, which is like a invalid operation exception, and throw a message like connection string not found or something. Yeah, connection string not found. Okay, so close the bracket, and then so this is ready, but we have to then create this connection string here. So let's go to app settings.json, and then add a comma here, and then say connection strings, and add this database settings. And here we need to provide some information, so which will be like server equal to, where is the server? So server is in my local DB, right? So I have to tell, okay, go to my local machine and search for MS SQL local DB instance of SQL Server, and within that there should be a database called as, you can give any name, so called as, let's say, demo repo DB. So that is a database name. If it's not there, it will create it, and the cluster connection should be true, otherwise the connection will fail. So you need to set this to true, and you should say that multiple active result sets, which is uh, basically telling that the single connection should be used for different transactions. Okay, so it is a more efficient way of doing it. So true, I think all this is correct. And yes, so server, database, treasure connection, multiple active result sets. So that's the minimum thing you can give. There are other parameters also you can add, but for now it is fine, right? So let's save this. So now we have the connection string in the app settings, we have everything else. So I think now the next step is to add the migration script. So remember, we are using code first approach, so which means I have to run some commands and it will create the database. So to do that, what I need to do is that I have to go to the package manager console, which is already here. If you can't see it here, you should go to tools and then you get package manager and package manager console. Okay, so here what I need to do is that I need to run this command, add migration. This name can be any name, so I'm just giving any DB. You can give A, B, C, anything will work. So the build is succeeded, build has succeeded. Now let's update database, so that the database will be created and it will run the migration script, which means the product table will be created. Okay, done. So let's now verify whether the database has been created successfully or not. So you can go to this SQL Server Object Explorer and you can see this thing has been created here. So if you cannot see it, then refresh it and it should appear here, demo repo DB, and inside this, let's see if the table is there or not. So now it's refreshing and now you can see the products table has been created, columns. It should contain the columns ID, name, and price. Okay, so it is as per our model class, so which I showed you here, the model class. So based on this, the table has been created. So before we move forward, we have to define some attributes which are called as the HTTP verbs. So if you go to product controller, now we have created a get products here, but we have to then tell that this is actually my HTTP get and this one is my HTTP post. Okay, so the controller has been well defined now. Next step is to run it. Here you can see the Swagger interface has opened. So you can use this Swagger interface to test the API. So it will give you a example here like this, but let's try it out. So try it out and then execute. So you should get an empty response, and this is the response body. This is the response basically. So, and it is empty, right? So 200 is success. So it is successful, but the response is empty. So the next thing we need to do is we have to add some products. So click on this and go to again try it out, and here we don't need this. This will be automatically added. The ID, what you need to do here is that you have to give some name, let's say clock, and here add 12.5. and then click on execute. So the clock has been added. So let's add one more item, clear, and let's add something called as like mat. So 10.9, again execute, and so second item also has been created. Let's go back to our get and see if we are able to retrieve these items. So execute, and you can see that 2 items has been returned, right? So this is how you need to work with Web API and database using a repository pattern. And hopefully this video has been useful to you. So again, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more such interesting videos. Thanks a lot for watching.